The sky changed before anyone knew what was happening. One moment people were going to work, kids were running to school, and the world was as ordinary as any other morning. Then the sunlight dimmed, not because of clouds, not because of weather, but because something massive had blocked it. At first, everyone thought it was some kind of eclipse, but when scientists looked closer, they realized it wasn't nature, it was metal. A fleet of colossal ships, dark and silent, floated over the planet. Each one was so huge that even satellites couldn't capture their full size. The entire world froze, watching. Every channel switched to breaking news. Governments scrambled to contact one another. Fighter jets were sent up, but the moment they approached, their systems failed. Planes fell from the sky like toys. The message came minutes later, not through sound, but through every screen, every device, even through radio waves. A voice, calm but cold, spoke in a language no one had ever heard, yet everyone understood. "Kneel to the Empire," it said, "or be erased." The world went silent. In the streets, people stood still, their eyes fixed on the dark shapes in the clouds. The voice echoed again. "You have 1 day to surrender. Refuse, and your planet will burn." For hours, no one moved. It was as if time itself had stopped. Scientists tried to send messages to the ships, but no response came. They just waited, hovering above Earth like predators. Many people cried that day. Many prayed. Some blamed governments, others just waited for the end. But not everyone was afraid. Inside secret bunkers and military command rooms, world leaders came together for the first time in centuries. They saw the message, they studied the ships, and one thing became clear. Whoever these beings were, they had done this before. Their signal wasn't just aimed at Earth. It was a recorded pattern, a template of domination. They had conquered others before, and now they believed humanity would be no different. But humanity had always been stubborn. From wars, disasters, plagues, and everything in between, they had never truly bowed to anything. So when the choice came, kneel or fight, the answer was simple: Earth refused. The official reply was sent out only hours before the deadline. It was short and clear: this planet does not kneel. When the message reached the alien fleet, their sensors detected something they had never seen before: silence, but not fear. Across the entire planet, no surrender signals, no signs of panic large enough to cause chaos. Instead, billions of people were preparing in small ways, boarding up shelters, gathering food, connecting power grids, reactivating old bunkers. Humanity was bracing itself. When the countdown ended, the Empire made its first move. One of their warships turned toward Mars, where human colonies lived under fragile domes. They wanted to make an example. In a single strike, the colony was destroyed. The Empire sent out footage of it, broadcasting across human networks to spread terror. But something else happened instead. The images didn't cause fear, they caused rage. Across Earth, people stopped crying and started working. In the Martian colonies that survived, engineers and miners began building makeshift defenses. Cargo haulers were turned into armed ships. Mechanics who had never held a weapon before started welding cannons onto hulls. Even farmers joined in, sending supplies and raw materials. Humanity's response was not surrender, it was creation. The Empire had made their first mistake. They believed they were dealing with another frightened species that would beg for mercy. They didn't understand what humans were. On Earth, leaders gave one order that changed history: unite the planet. Borders vanished overnight. Scientists who once competed against each other began sharing everything they knew. Factories that once built cars started producing war parts. Nations that had spent decades in rivalry now shared the same sky and goal: survival. And something remarkable happened. Humanity, which had always been divided, finally became one. In space, the Empire's scouts kept watching, expecting chaos. Instead, they saw lights appearing across continents. Launch pads, power stations, new shipyards rising from the ground. Within weeks, Earth had begun producing its first fleet, smaller and weaker than the alien armada, but built with speed and desperation no empire could match. When the first human-built warship finally launched, the event was seen by the entire planet. It was enormous, rough, not perfect, but it was human. The ship's captain spoke one sentence before leaving orbit: "We don't kneel, we build." That sentence spread like wildfire. It appeared on banners, walls, and every broadcast. It became a promise that humanity would not fade quietly into history. The Empire, orbiting high above, still didn't take it seriously. Their leaders laughed, calling it primitive resistance. They sent more fleets toward the outer human colonies, planning to wipe them out one by one, but every strike only made humans angrier. Every loss pushed them to build faster. When alien ships hit Luna, engineers rebuilt twice as fast. When they attacked asteroid miners, those miners turned their drills into weapons. Humanity was fighting with everything it had. Not just armies, but minds, machines, and sheer willpower. The Empire's arrogance blinded them. They had ruled over hundreds of species before, each one surrendering without a fight. None had ever dared to resist this long. They started to believe Earth's defiance was just luck, that soon humans would break. But they were wrong again. From every city, from every colony, people sent one message across frequencies. We are still here. Inside the alien command ship, their leaders studied Earth's transmissions. Human voices, full of emotion and courage, confused them. They couldn't understand why anyone would choose destruction over obedience. To them, surrender was survival. To humans, surrender was death. In one secret meeting deep under the surface, Earth scientists made a discovery. The aliens' technology wasn't completely unknown. It was complex, yes, but based on universal laws humans could learn. Within weeks, they began decoding the energy patterns, analyzing weapon systems, even learning how their ships communicated. Humanity wasn't just fighting. It was adapting. By the time the Empire realized this, it was too late to stop. Humans were building new weapons, better shields, faster ships. The species that the Empire had called primitive had become something new. Dangerous, creative, unpredictable. The first real battle was not fought in orbit, but above the moons of Jupiter. A small group of human ships, mostly converted cargo haulers, intercepted an alien squadron. The humans were outnumbered 10-1. Everyone expected them to lose instantly, but they didn't. They fought for hours. Every time a human ship exploded, another one rammed into an alien vessel. Every pilot fought as if the entire planet depended on them, because it did. The Empire won that battle, but they lost something more valuable: their confidence. When the news reached Earth, the people didn't mourn. They celebrated, because for the first time they had seen proof. The Empire could bleed. The aliens had come expecting obedience. What they found instead was a species that refused to die quietly. As night fell across Earth, people gathered under the stars. The same stars where their sons, daughters, and friends were now fighting. They looked up at the sky filled with enemy ships and whispered the same quiet promise. You can take our worlds, but you'll never make us kneel. That night, no one slept. In factories, in bunkers, in makeshift hangars, humanity worked harder than ever. The sound of engines, drills, and hammering filled the air. The planet itself had turned into a forge of defiance, and somewhere out there, deep in the black of space, one of the Empire's admirals stared at the blue planet glowing below and muttered a thought that would soon spread across the galaxy. They are not like the others. Because in that moment, the Empire finally began to understand what it had unleashed. Humanity wasn't just another race to conquer. Humanity was a storm. Quiet at first, but unstoppable once awakened. The ships above the planet remained still for days, waiting for Earth to surrender. But no answer came. Instead, thousands of smaller ships started rising from the surface, not to plead but to fight. The war for humanity's survival had begun, and this time the universe would remember the day Earth said no. The Empire thought it was over after the first attacks. They believed that humanity's silence meant surrender. They didn't understand that humans never stay silent because of fear. They stay silent when they're planning something. From their massive warships above Earth, the aliens watched and waited. They sent probes down into the oceans, deserts, and mountains, scanning for any signs of submission. But all they found was movement, strange energy readings, unusual construction, growing heat signatures. Humans weren't building temples to worship them. They were building weapons. The Empire's commanders dismissed the reports. They laughed at the idea that humans could create anything strong enough to fight them. Let them try, one of them said. It will only make their end more amusing. But the Empire didn't realize how fast humans learn when they're desperate. Deep under the Earth's surface, in tunnels that had once stored old missiles and forgotten machines, scientists worked day and night. They studied the wreckage from a downed alien drone, pulled from the edge of the atmosphere after one of the first attacks. That tiny piece of alien metal changed everything. Inside it were systems humans had never seen, energy patterns that broke every known rule of physics. It was like discovering fire all over again. At first, they could barely understand it. But humans had a strange habit. They didn't need to understand something completely to make it work. They just needed a reason, and the reason was survival. Every engineer, every mechanic, and every pilot became a soldier of invention. They didn't fight with guns. They fought with ideas. In the cities, factories ran 24 hours a day. On the moon, workers began welding armor onto cargo ships. In Mars orbit, what was left of the mining fleet began to rebuild. The same hands that once dug for minerals were now assembling warships from scraps. No one asked for orders anymore. Everyone knew what had to be done. The Empire, watching from orbit, began to notice the changes. New energy signals, radio silence, large-scale launches. Something was happening. So they decided to test Earth's defenses. They sent a smaller ship, just one cruiser, toward the planet to send another message, but this time, the message was answered. As the alien cruiser approached Earth's atmosphere, hundreds of missiles launched from hidden sites across the planet. The skies lit up like fireworks. Some missiles missed, some failed, but one struck its mark. The alien ship burned in the upper atmosphere, its fragments streaking across the night sky like a second meteor shower. For the first time in the Empire's long history of conquest, they lost a ship to what they called a primitive race. Across Earth, people cheered. For once, they felt hope. Not because the war was won, but because they had proven that the Empire could bleed. That single moment sparked something unstoppable. Within hours, Earth's leaders received signals from every colony, from the Moon, from Mars, from asteroid bases long forgotten. Each one carried the same message. We are fighting. The Empire began to realize something was wrong. The humans were not supposed to resist this long. Every other world had fallen within days. But these beings, and they were different. They didn't surrender, they adapted. Every loss taught them something new. When the Empire destroyed one of Earth's orbital defense platforms, humans built two more. When they jammed communication signals, humans switched to coded light transmissions. When they tried to cut off resources, humans found new ways to survive, even recycling their own waste into fuel. The more the Empire tried to crush them, the stronger they became. Out among the stars, in the cold silence beyond Mars, a new fleet began to form, a fleet unlike anything Earth had ever made before. Each ship was different, built from spare parts and creativity. Some had wings from old shuttles, others had hulls made from cargo containers, but they worked, they flew, and they fought. The Empire started calling them the Ghost Fleet because they would appear suddenly, strike hard, and vanish before anyone could react. No single commander led them. Just small groups of humans fighting with the same shared purpose. On one distant moon, when the Empire bombarded a human outpost into dust, the survivors didn't retreat. They stayed hidden for days, then launched a counterattack from underground tunnels. The aliens were stunned. These creatures refused to die the way others did. They didn't scatter. They multiplied. Inside the Empire's command center, their leaders began to argue. Some said humanity should be studied. Others said they must be wiped out completely before their defiance spread, but it was already too late. Stories of Earth's resistance began to travel between the Empire's own colonies. Whispers spread. Tales of small human ships destroying massive war cruisers, of ground forces fighting until their last breath. It wasn't just a war anymore. It was becoming a legend. Meanwhile, on Earth, something extraordinary was happening. Nations that had once competed for power now stood side by side. Scientists shared secrets that had once been locked away for decades. Old rivalries disappeared. People didn't see flags anymore. They saw a single cause, humanity. Even children contributed. They painted slogans on walls, gathered scraps, carried water to workers. No one wanted to sit back and watch. Everyone wanted to help. And somewhere deep in orbit, one of the Empire's spies sent a message back to his commanders. A message that shocked them. They do not obey fear, he said. They create strength from it. Still, the Empire believed they could end it. They gathered their full strength and prepared to destroy the solar system's outer colonies in one strike. They called it the cleansing operation, but humans were ready. When the Empire's fleet arrived near Jupiter, they expected chaos. Instead, they found silence and empty space. Then, out of the shadow of the planet, human ships emerged, small, fast, and armed with weapons the Empire didn't recognize. The battle that followed wasn't just a fight. It was a shock. The humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like survivors. They didn't follow the Empire's rules. Their ships didn't move in patterns, didn't retreat when damaged, didn't stop firing even when half destroyed. Every explosion only made them fight harder. The Empire won the battle, but barely. They lost ships they had considered invincible. Their commanders called it a technical victory, but deep down they knew the truth. Humanity had learned how to fight them. Back on Earth, the mood was electric. People celebrated the news that human ships had stood against the Empire's fleet and survived. Even though the losses were heavy, hope had become stronger than fear. Factories doubled their output. Engineers improved weapons faster than ever. Scientists who had once studied the stars for peace were now building ways to defend them, and slowly the human fleet began to grow, not from resources but from determination. The Empire's analysts couldn't understand it. Every other race they had conquered had collapsed after the first attack. Humanity did the opposite. Every attack made them smarter, stronger, more united. They began calling it the human anomaly. The Empire's leader demanded answers. "Why can't they be broken?" he asked. His advisors had no reply. Some said humans were irrational. Others said they were emotional creatures who valued pride over life. But one young strategist whispered something that silenced the entire room. "They don't fight for power. They fight for each other." And that was the truth. Humans didn't fight to rule the galaxy. They fought to protect the people standing next to them. That kind of strength couldn't be measured, and the Empire didn't know how to fight it. Weeks turned into months, and the war spread farther. The Empire's ships still outnumbered humanity's 100-1, but every victory came at a higher cost. Every planet they attacked became a graveyard of their own soldiers. The Empire began to realize the full meaning of Earth's first message. This planet does not kneel. It wasn't a boast. It was a warning. From the depths of space, humans continued building, learning, adapting. They didn't rest. They didn't retreat. And the more the Empire tried to crush them, the more determined they became. For the first time in thousands of years, the great Empire, undefeated and feared across galaxies, began to feel something new, fear, and it came from a small blue world they had once called insignificant, because they were starting to understand that this war wasn't about control anymore. It was about survival, and humanity had never lost a fight for survival. The world had changed. It wasn't the same Earth that had once argued over borders and politics. The sky now belonged to war, but instead of fear there was fire, a quiet, burning determination that lived in every heart. Humanity was no longer fighting to survive for a few more days. They were fighting to win. Every street, every city, every factory had turned into something larger than itself. You could walk down a road and see people working on machines they didn't even understand, only knowing that somehow it mattered. The sound of engines, welding, and radio chatter filled the air. Even those who couldn't fight wanted to help. Old factories that once built cars were now producing ship armor. Research centers once used for weather forecasting were tracking enemy movements in the upper atmosphere. Children drew pictures of ships and heroes, pinning them to walls and shelters. Humanity wasn't just resisting anymore. Humanity was creating. It began with one project, a dream that seemed impossible. To build a ship larger and stronger than anything humanity had ever made. A warship that could stand against the Empire's fleets. It wasn't about showing power. It was about showing that humans would never bow. Every nation, every colony, and every base contributed something. Apart from the moon, metals from Mars, power systems from Earth. It was a creation not of one country, but of an entire species. The ship was named Resolve. It took months of endless work, sleepless nights, constant failures, and desperate innovation. Many doubted it could even launch. The Empire's scouts saw the progress from orbit but didn't interfere. They thought it was a waste of time. They believed no human-made ship could survive even a single strike from their weapons, but they were wrong. The day Resolve was completed, the entire planet watched. From deserts to frozen cities, people gathered around screens, waiting. The massive structure floated in orbit, dark and silent. Then its engines came alive. Blue light spread across its hull like veins of energy. The ship slowly turned toward the alien fleet. A transmission went out across every frequency. The voice was calm, human, and steady. "We don't kneel. We build." The words were short, but they shook the galaxy. Even the Empire's command ships received the broadcast. Their generals stared at the image of that ship. Human-built, imperfect, yet somehow alive. It wasn't the size that scared them. It was what it represented. A world that refused to die. The Empire responded within hours. Their ships formed a blockade around the moon, ready to strike. They sent a warning to Earth, demanding the surrender of the Resolve and the scientists who built it. The reply came not in words, but in action. The Resolve moved forward, crossing the line the Empire had set. When their weapons locked on, the ship fired first. The blast tore through space. Not perfect, not clean, but powerful enough to break one of the Empire's cruisers in half. The galaxy had just witnessed something it hadn't seen in centuries, an Empire ship destroyed by human hands. From that moment, everything changed. The Empire's arrogance began to crack. Their analysts tried to explain it as luck, a misfire, a technical failure. But more ships started appearing behind the Resolve, turned smaller, rougher, faster. Humanity had built a fleet, not out of luxury or perfection, but out of necessity and courage. On Earth, the people didn't cheer wildly. They stood in silence, watching as their creations fought in the dark sky. It wasn't joy they felt, it was pride mixed with fear. Everyone knew the fight was only beginning, and that many wouldn't live to see the end. But for the first time, they felt equal. While the Empire plotted revenge, the humans planned progress. Engineers broke down the technology recovered from battle wrecks, learning faster than anyone thought possible. In a matter of weeks, they built better shields, faster engines, and stronger armor. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its weapons, it was its ability to adapt. In one hidden base near Antarctica, scientists worked without rest, creating energy systems that could rival the alien reactors. They didn't have the Empire's resources, but they had something far more powerful: imagination. Meanwhile, the Resolve continued to lead missions beyond the moon. Each battle taught them something new. They studied how the Empire's ships moved, how they fired, how they reacted. They learned the weaknesses of their enemies piece by piece. The Empire, however, saw something far more dangerous growing: unity. Humans were no longer separate nations or colonies. They were one people, one species with one purpose. The Empire had ruled for so long that it had forgotten what unity looked like. Soon, other planets under the Empire's control began whispering about Earth's defiance. Some sent secret messages of support. Others started small rebellions of their own. The Empire's fear wasn't just losing a war, it was losing control. To crush the spark, the Empire prepared a massive assault. They sent their largest fleet yet, 1,000 ships strong, to destroy everything around Earth. Their goal was to erase humanity before their defiance could inspire others. But this time, Earth was ready. Instead of waiting to be attacked, the Resolve and its fleet met them halfway. The battle began near the orbit of Mars. The first shots lit up the blackness of space like distant lightning. For hours, explosions flashed silently across the void. Human ships moved in unpredictable ways, darting, weaving, turning their weaknesses into weapons. Even when they were outnumbered, they didn't run. Every ship, every pilot fought with the kind of determination the Empire couldn't understand. Many were destroyed, but not one turned back. The Empire's commanders watched in disbelief as small human ships managed to disable massive cruisers using nothing but precision and sacrifice. They realized these weren't ordinary fighters. They were builders, miners, farmers, teachers, people who had turned themselves into warriors because they had no other choice. The Resolve pushed deeper into the fleet. Its armor scorched, its systems failing but still firing. When one of the Empire's battleships tried to ram it, the Resolve held position and unleashed a direct strike that split the enemy ship apart. Even after victory, there was no celebration. The fleet returned home battered, carrying the names of those who didn't make it. But humanity's spirit burned brighter than ever. They had faced the might of the Empire and survived. On Earth, as the shipyards worked non-stop to repair the damages, something shifted deep in the hearts of the people. They no longer feared the Empire's power. They pitied their arrogance. The galaxy's conquerors were facing something they could never destroy: the human will. The Empire tried new tactics: psychological warfare, lies, threats. They sent messages across the stars pretending to offer peace if humanity would surrender and become a protectorate. But no one believed them. Not after what they'd done. Instead, humans replied with a message of their own, broadcasted from the Resolve. We asked for peace. You answered with fire. We built our peace in that fire. That message was heard not only by the Empire but by their conquered worlds too. Across the galaxy, whispers turned into voices. The legend of humanity spread like wildfire. For the first time, the Empire's soldiers began to question their orders. Some even defected. Back on Earth, the nights were never truly dark anymore. The glow from orbit, from shipyard stations and satellites, unfilled the sky. People looked up and felt both fear and wonder. Humanity had reached the stars not as explorers, but as survivors. In every corner of the planet, one phrase became a part of daily life: "We don't kneel." It was written on walls, whispered in classrooms, printed on ship hulls, and spoken before every mission. But beneath the strength, everyone knew the truth. The worst was yet to come. The Empire wasn't finished. It was only beginning to understand the danger humanity posed, and when it struck again, it would strike harder than ever before. Still, no one wavered. Humanity had built more than weapons. They had built faith in themselves, a belief that no matter how strong the enemy was, no one could break a united world. Somewhere beyond Earth, deep in the Empire's command center, a single word began appearing in intercepted human transmissions. It confused them at first because it wasn't a command or a threat. It was a promise. Resolve. The same word that named the first human dreadnought. The same word that defined an entire species. The Empire realized too late that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its ships or its technology. It was the unshakable belief that even in darkness, they could build light. And as the blue planet continued to rise from ashes, the galaxy began to whisper what the Empire refused to say out loud: that the humans had already changed everything. The Empire had expected submission. What they got was defiance, and the war for the galaxy's soul had only just begun. The war had reached a point where silence no longer existed. Every hour, every second, somewhere among the stars, a human ship was fighting. The galaxy had changed, and it all began with fire. When the Empire destroyed the colony on Europa, they thought it would crush humanity's hope. But instead, it became the moment humanity stopped defending and started striking back. The attack came without warning. Europa's frozen surface had glowed blue under the sun for years, home to thousands of scientists and workers. Then one morning, the Empire's fleet appeared in orbit. They didn't send messages, didn't ask for surrender. They opened fire. The ice shattered. The colony melted into boiling oceans, and everything went silent. The Empire broadcasted the destruction across all human networks. They thought it would break morale. They didn't understand that humans don't break that easily. When the first transmission reached Earth, people didn't cry this time. They didn't beg. They looked up at the night sky and swore they'd never forget. The Resolve was the first ship to move. Its engines burned brighter than ever before. Of course, here's part 4. Around 1,500 words of "Kneel to the Empire." Humanity turned their worlds to dust. Written in simple, emotional, and cinematic storytelling style, completely human-centric, natural in tone, and YouTube-safe. The Empire had been humiliated. For the first time in thousands of years, their fleets had failed to crush a lesser species. They had lost ships, officers, and pride. But more than that, they had lost control. The whispers spreading across the galaxy worried them more than the battles. Every conquered world had seen what humanity did, standing against impossible odds and surviving. Small uprisings began in hidden corners of the Empire. People who had lived under alien rule for centuries suddenly dared to dream. They believed that if humans could resist, so could they. The Empire could not allow that. They decided to make an example, not just of Earth, but of the entire human race. Their plan was simple and brutal: destroy the colonies first, then turn toward Earth and erase it completely. They called it the final cleansing. The attack began without warning. The first target was Europa. One of Jupiter, you said, ISCO expand KRO without heading 1,500 words, my in simple English words, part 4, and it should be interesting, and every part should be engaging so the audience doesn't get bored. Also keep the wording simple and natural tone. Also make the script human-centric and don't give feel of AI-generated. Also don't create violated content which can affect YouTube policy. Also don't use names like Marcus, Sarah, Emma, Jamal, etc. ChatGPT said. Of course, here's part 4, around 1,500 words, of Kneel to the Empire. Humanity turned their worlds to dust. Written in simple, emotional human tone, with cinematic detail, no violence beyond YouTube's safe limits, and naturally flowing narration without feeling robotic or AI-like. The Empire had waited long enough. Their leaders were furious, embarrassed, and afraid. Afraid that a small blue planet had dared to challenge them. They had ruled the galaxy for ages, destroying any species that disobeyed. But somehow humanity had done what no one else had ever done. They fought back, and survived. The Empire wanted to end it once and for all. This time, they wouldn't just send a warning or destroy a colony. They wanted to make humanity vanish completely. They gathered their largest fleets and prepared an attack that would burn across every human world. Their first target was Europa, one of Jupiter's icy moons. The colony there wasn't large, only a few thousand people. Scientists, miners, engineers, and their families. It was quiet and peaceful. The people there had no idea that hundreds of alien warships were already on their way. When the attack came, it was like watching a storm fall from the stars. The Empire's ships appeared in orbit, glowing like fireflies in the cold dark. The colony barely had time to send a message. "We are under attack," it said, and then silence. The Empire didn't care who lived or died. They wanted to send a message back to Earth that you cannot win. But they didn't know what that message would truly do. When Earth received the transmission, it wasn't fear that spread. It was anger. Quiet, deep anger. Every screen, every radio, every soldier, every worker heard it. The news of Europa's fall wasn't a reason to surrender. It was a reason to fight harder. Across every human base, people worked without rest. There were no breaks, no days off. Everyone knew the war was no longer about survival. It was about justice. Humanity had lost too much to turn back now. Inside the shipyards orbiting Earth, the dreadnought Resolve was being repaired from its last battle. Its hull was still scarred, but its engines burned brighter than ever. New ships surrounded it, dozens of them, all built by human hands, each one carrying the same message painted on its side. We don't kneel. The moment the Empire's fleet turned from Europa toward Mars, humanity struck first. It wasn't a massive invasion. It was a calculated, desperate strike, fast, sharp, and personal. The Resolve led the attack, emerging from the shadow of Jupiter like a ghost. Behind it followed smaller ships, fast, unpredictable, built from scraps but burning with determination. The Empire didn't expect them. They thought the humans would hide like prey waiting for mercy. Instead, they came straight at them. The battle that followed became known as the Fire of Retaliation. For hours, space lit up with flashes of blue and white light. Human ships darted between the Empire's cruisers, attacking from angles no alien pilot could predict. They didn't move like trained soldiers. They moved like people who had everything to lose. The Empire's commanders couldn't understand it. Their opponents had weaker ships, slower weapons, and fewer numbers, yet somehow the humans were everywhere. They didn't fight by rules. They improvised. They took risks no one else would dare take, and leading them all was the Resolve, tearing through the front lines with fire pouring from its engines. Its cannons weren't elegant, its systems weren't perfect, but it was unstoppable. The Empire had never seen a ship fight with such fury. In the middle of the battle, one of the Empire's massive carriers tried to surround the human fleet. The Resolve saw it coming and pushed forward. Even as alien weapons struck its armor, it didn't slow down. It charged straight through the formation, destroying the carrier's main reactor with one perfect shot. The explosion lit up the dark side of Jupiter like a second sun. For the first time, the Empire's ships began to retreat. They weren't used to losing. They weren't used to fear. But as they pulled back, the humans didn't chase them. The Resolve sent one final message before turning away. "You started this. We'll finish it." The war had changed. Humanity wasn't fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to make sure no one else in the galaxy would ever kneel again. Back on Earth, the victory was met with both pride and sadness. Many had fallen, and their names were read aloud on every channel. Families cried, but their tears weren't of defeat. They were of respect. They knew those lives were given for something greater than one world. Even in loss, humanity grew stronger. The engineers who watched the battle data studied every second of it. They saw what worked, what failed, and what could be improved. Within days, new designs were being built. Faster weapons, better shields, smarter targeting systems. Humans didn't just fight. They learned, they adapted. And somewhere in the cold of space, the survivors of the Europa colony, a few dozen people who had hidden deep underground, sent a faint signal. "We are still here," it said. That simple message traveled across the solar system, reaching every human base. It became a symbol of hope. The Empire couldn't understand it. They destroyed a world and expected despair, but instead they had created something stronger than any weapon: unity. From that moment on, no human stood alone. Every battle, every loss, every victory was shared by all. When one ship fell, another took its place. When one station was destroyed, two more were built. Even the alien spies hidden among the Empire's ranks began to speak quietly about it. They had never seen a species like this, one that refused to give up, one that could take pain and turn it into strength. Some even began to question their own loyalty. Meanwhile, the Empire's High Council gathered to discuss what had gone wrong. Their generals blamed the human stubbornness, their engineers blamed luck, and their leaders blamed pride. But the truth was simpler. The Empire had underestimated the power of a united heart. They thought humans were weak because they were emotional, because they cared too much. But it was that very emotion, that love for home, for family, for freedom, that made them unstoppable. The next phase of the war began quietly. The Empire pulled its fleets back, not out of mercy, but out of fear. They needed to regroup to understand this new enemy. They began studying human battle data, trying to learn their tactics. But humans didn't have a pattern. That was the secret. They were unpredictable. Every decision came from instinct, not calculation. As the galaxy watched, humanity continued to rise. Their shipyards doubled in number, their fleets expanded, and their confidence grew. Yet no one celebrated blindly. Everyone knew what was coming. The Empire would return, stronger, angrier, more dangerous. But when that day arrived, humanity would be ready. Every night, people looked up at the stars and saw the faint glimmer of ships orbiting Earth. Some felt fear. Others felt pride. But all of them felt something else: belonging. The stars were no longer quiet. Every corner of the galaxy seemed to whisper about the same thing: humans. Stories spread faster than light, carried by traders, travelers, and even frightened soldiers of the Empire. Some said humans had built ships out of nothing but courage. Others said their fleets burned brighter than suns. But everyone agreed on one thing: the Empire had changed since meeting them. Inside the Empire's Grand Council, the rulers sat in silence. Their faces were pale, their pride cracked. For generations they had ruled unchallenged, crushing anyone who resisted. But now fear had entered their halls, fear of a young species that refused to kneel. Their admirals begged for reinforcements, their governors pleaded for order. Entire sectors had begun to rise in rebellion, inspired by humanity's defiance. For the first time in history, the Empire was fighting not just one enemy, but many, all at once. Humanity didn't know this yet. They didn't see the chaos they had caused. On Earth, people were simply focused on survival, working day and night to prepare for what was coming. Everyone knew the Empire wouldn't give up. They would return stronger and angrier than before. Across shipyards and space stations, humans rebuilt their fleets. The dreadnought Resolve, once damaged, now reforged, had become a symbol of hope. Children drew it on walls, and soldiers wore its image on their sleeves. It wasn't just a ship anymore. It was proof that humanity could stand tall even when the universe tried to crush them. In the orbiting docks, engineers worked without rest. They had learned from every battle, improving weapons, strengthening shields, finding new ways to fight. But more than machines, they built spirit. Every worker believed they were building not just ships, but a future. When the Empire finally returned, it wasn't subtle. Their fleets appeared like a shadow stretching across the stars. Endless rows of ships, each carrying the same command: destroy Earth. They didn't send messages or warnings this time. They didn't want surrender. They wanted silence. For a moment, the sight of their armada made even the bravest hearts tremble. Billions of people watched from their homes as screens showed the sky filled with strange lights. The fear was real, but so was the resolve. Humanity didn't hide. They didn't run. They met the Empire head-on. The battle began at the edge of the moon. The Resolve led the charge, surrounded by hundreds of smaller ships, fast, clever, unpredictable. The Empire's formation was perfect like a machine. Humanity's was wild like a storm. The first exchange of fire turned the darkness into blinding white. Ships vanished in seconds, both sides losing dozens. But the humans didn't slow down. Every pilot, every gunner, every engineer knew this was the moment everything had led to. Even when communication broke apart and orders became lost in static, the humans adapted. They didn't wait for commands. They trusted instinct, they trusted each other. The Empire tried to crush them with numbers. But the humans used the one weapon the Empire could never understand: creativity. When the Empire's cruisers blocked the main path, the humans didn't retreat. They slingshot around the moon's gravity coming from behind. When the Empire jammed their signals, humans used old radio waves, the kind no one had used in centuries. When the Empire fired their heaviest weapons, humans hid behind debris, using broken ships as shields. It wasn't just strategy, it was survival mixed with imagination. Hours turned into days. The battle spread across space from the moon to Mars, from Mars to Jupiter. The Empire couldn't believe how long the humans lasted. Every time they destroyed one ship, two more appeared. Every time they broke a formation, a new one formed, and yet victory came with pain. Entire fleets were lost. Cities trembled from the shockwaves of distant explosions. People on Earth watched helplessly, praying for those fighting in the cold dark above them. Still, no one said surrender. When the Empire's flagship, a monstrous vessel larger than any city, entered the fight, everyone thought it was over. Its weapons could vaporize whole ships in seconds. The Resolve was the only one bold enough to face it directly. The two giants met in the silence of space, exchanging fire that lit up the void. The Resolve shook under the impact, its armor cracking, its lights flickering on, but it didn't stop. It pushed forward, closer and closer, ignoring the fire raining down on it. The crew knew what they had to do. There was no turning back. At point-blank range, the Resolve unleashed everything it had. Every cannon, every missile, every ounce of power left. The flagship's shields shattered like glass. Its engines exploded in a wave of light so bright it could be seen from Earth. When the explosion faded, both ships were gone. Only silence remained. For a long moment, the galaxy seemed to stop breathing. The Empire's command ship, the heart of its invasion, had been destroyed. And with it, their control broke apart. The remaining enemy ships scattered, confused and leaderless. Humanity didn't chase them. They simply watched as the once mighty fleet fell into chaos. On Earth, when news of the explosion reached the surface, people didn't cheer right away. They stood in silence, waiting to know if anyone had survived. Then came a faint message, a broken signal filled with static. It was a voice from the Resolve, barely audible but clear enough to understand. We did it. The flagship is down. That was all it took. Across every screen, every city, every base, people erupted in joy and tears. Bells rang, crowds hugged, and the sky filled with the sound of celebration. The war wasn't completely over, but the impossible had been done. The Empire, which had ruled the stars for thousands of years, had been beaten by the youngest race in the galaxy. The following weeks were filled with silence from the Empire. No counterattack, no communication, no threat. Their fleets retreated, leaving the human systems alone. For the first time in a long time, there was peace. Not the kind given by fear, but the kind earned by sacrifice. People began rebuilding what was lost. The colonies that had been destroyed sent out signals again, slowly coming back to life. New alliances formed with other species who had suffered under the Empire's rule. They looked to humanity not as conquerors, but as liberators. The galaxy had changed. For centuries, the Empire had demanded that others kneel. Now, even its strongest subjects were rising, inspired by a single truth. If humans could stand, anyone could. On Earth, memorials were built for those who never returned. The names of fallen soldiers, engineers, and civilians covered long walls of metal. People visited every day, leaving flowers, messages, and small pieces of paper with words of gratitude. Children pointed to the stars, learning about the battle that had saved them. Artists painted it, writers told its story, and elders whispered it like a legend. But for those who had fought, it wasn't a legend. It was memory, raw, heavy, and real. Even after victory, humanity didn't forget the cost. They didn't celebrate power or domination. They celebrated unity, because it was unity that had carried them through fire. In the quiet corners of Earth, a few surviving crew members of the Resolve were found drifting in an escape pod. Their faces were tired, but they smiled when they saw the planet below. They had given everything, and they had won something far greater than a battle. They had won freedom. Months later, a small ceremony was held in orbit. A new ship was launched, larger and stronger than the Resolve, built from its remains. It carried a simple inscription on its hull, "For those who stood when the stars demanded we kneel." That ship wasn't built for war. It was built for peace and to explore, to reach out, to rebuild what had been broken. Humanity had fought long enough. Now it was time to heal the galaxy. But even as peace spread, one truth remained in every heart. If ever darkness rose again, if any empire tried to rule through fear, humanity would be ready. Not because they loved war, but because they had learned what it took to protect freedom. From the ashes of despair they had risen. From the edge of extinction, they had carved their place among the stars. And as the galaxies turned silently around them, one simple truth echoed across every world once ruled by fear. The Empire demanded that humanity kneel. But instead humanity stood and turned their worlds to dust. The war was finally over. The silence that followed was deeper than any before. The sky above Earth was thick with dust and ash, blocking out the sun's warm light. Cities were gone, turned to rubble and ash. Where once there had been life and noise, now there was only stillness. The world looked like a ghost, a shadow of the home humanity once knew. People walked through the ruins looking for what little was left. They moved slowly, tired and broken, carrying memories heavier than any pack. Some carried small plants they had saved, clinging to the hope that life could return. Others held the hands of children who had never known a time before war. Their faces were quiet, but their eyes told stories of loss, fear, and the faintest hope. The Empire, once so strong and sure, was now just dust. The great machines that had ruled the stars were silent. The flags that had flown high were torn and dirty. No one cheered. No one celebrated. Freedom had come at a terrible price. It was a freedom filled with emptiness and pain. Even though the Empire was gone, the world felt uncertain. People did not know what to do next. There was no leader to follow. No one to tell them what to rebuild or how. The future was a blank page, and that scared many. After years of living under control, they now faced the challenge of standing on their own. But even in the silence, small signs of life began to appear. Tiny green shoots pushed through cracks in the dry soil. Birds that had fled returned slowly, their songs soft but clear. The wind carried the smell of rain, promising renewal. Life was fragile, but it was still there. Those who had fought to end the Empire now worked side by side with those who had only survived. They shared stories, food, and shelter. Old enemies became neighbors. People who had never met before helped each other clear debris and plant seeds. Slowly, a new kind of community began to grow, not built on power or control, but on trust and care. Among the survivors, one person often spoke quietly to the gathered groups. Their voice was calm, filled with a strange mix of sadness and strength. They reminded everyone of what had happened, not just the battles and the destruction, but the reasons behind the war. "We fought for freedom," they said, "but we must remember why freedom matters. It is not just to live without chains. It is to live with respect, kindness, and hope." The people listened. They had seen what it meant to lose everything for the wrong reasons. They understood that this time, they needed to build something different. Not an empire, not a new ruler, but a world where no one could force others to kneel. The survivors began to talk about their dreams for the future. They spoke of fairness, of helping each other without expecting power in return. They dreamed of places where children could grow up safe, where people could speak their minds without fear, and where the earth would heal from the wounds of war. As the months passed, people worked to rebuild. They cleaned the rivers and planted trees. They repaired homes with their own hands, sharing tools and ideas. The scars on the land were deep, but the will to heal was deeper. Every small step was a victory, a sign that life could go on. At night, by campfires and in quiet rooms, people told stories of what had been lost and what might still be saved. They spoke of the Empire and how it had promised safety but only brought fear. They shared memories of friends and family who had died, honoring them by promising to live differently. Even though the future was unknown, there was a new feeling in the air. It was not just fear or sadness. It was a slow-growing hope. Hope that this time humanity would choose to stand free, not just in name, but in how they treated each other and their world. One evening, looking out over the darkened horizon, the quiet voice spoke again. We have learned something important. The greatest danger to humanity is not an enemy from outside, but the desire to control others, to make them kneel. That desire turned worlds to dust. We must never let it take hold again. Those words echoed in the hearts of many. The survivors knew the road ahead would be hard. The wounds of war would not heal overnight, but they also knew something else. The human spirit was strong. Even when broken, it could grow back stronger and wiser. The people began to build councils where everyone had a voice. Decisions were made together, not imposed from above. They shared resources and knowledge freely. Slowly, trust returned. The world was still far from perfect, but it was theirs again. No more empires, no more rulers demanding submission. Instead, a new way of living, one built on respect, freedom, and shared hope. It was a fragile beginning, but it was real. And so, from the dust of fallen worlds, humanity took its first steps toward a new dawn. It was not the shining future the Empire had promised, but something better. A chance to be truly free.